It's another session from Grove Studios in Ypsilanti. I'm John Bomarito. Acoustic Alternatives made possible with that support. Grove Studios, you've seen the podcast studio, but now you're getting to see one of the big deluxe studios down the hall today because I've welcomed a duo to the studio, and we decided to utilize the space here. It's Francis Luca Court. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, John. How are you?
Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for having us.
Happy to be here.
Total pleasure. Francis Luca Court is Brian Powers and Nicholas Gunty. They make beautiful, soothing music in a non-Yanni kind of way, and they've got a new release called Safe and Sound. It came out in February. I'll throw that on the camera so we can kind of see what it looks like.
Yeah.
And how about we start with a song?
That sounds great.
What song will you do this time?
This song is called Thank You, Derrick Watson. It's off that record.
Mother brought me into this garden first, taught me to weed by working deep down in the earth. And while I was clutching dirt, I was struck, I was hurt, all that grows so thirst. Once my father said he would read me to bed, worn down from the job he had to keep me fed. But I was too old and I, blushing red, yelled instead, never was the same head. Now every night I come to town, all I ever think about are all the times I let you down. For all the times I let you down. Derrick Watson, in 100 years you'll be red for shade, neath an orange sun with a mighty pen and a level head. And although it may be little praise, my friends and I think you're great for what you've done today. Now I spend most my time in this room writing tunes, locked up in my point of view, feeling blue. But as soon as I put on my shoe and walk outside and I'm with you, that's when I learn something new. Still every morn I stumble through a silver light so bright and true, till it turns to gray, rain coming soon. Turns a gray, rain coming soon.
Today on Acoustic Alternatives, I'm joined by Francis Luca Court, a track from their newest album, Safe in Sound. It's Thank You, Derrick Watson. And I know last night on stage at the Arc, first of all, I wasn't this close and I couldn't see how beautifully you guys work together, and just like you're looking at each other and you're figuring out what to do. There's some magic in that. But you encouraged the audience to Google Derrick Watson. I'm just going to flat out ask you, who's Derrick Watson?
Derrick Watson is, I believe, a district judge. I could be wrong about that. He's a judge. He's a federal judge in Hawaii who became well known in the political scene in the late teens for, I believe, the injunction of the Muslim ban on in, what was it, 2017, I believe.
Yeah, it's when Trump was proposing the Muslim ban. He was the one who stepped in and paused that baby.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for playing that. It's another great track on this record.
Thank you.
It's been a bit of time between records. Obviously, there's some things going on in the world that slow life down. We'll get to that. I do want to back up to the origin story of the band, though, because we're going to pretend like we've never had a session before, because you have visited me at the radio station I used to work at. But to me, the podcast is a whole fresh start. So The band started in Indiana, right?
Yeah, South Bend, Indiana, formed when we were young lads in college. We were both from South Bend originally, and then after, we had a really wonderful opportunity to, during our senior year in college, to travel to Uganda and record a record with the children's choir over there. And so that opportunity kind of solidified our, desire to do this together, and then moved to Chicago after a little hiatus, and then have kept trucking from there. We've been a distance band for a while, but yeah, really our roots are in South Bend, and we're really grateful to still be doing it.
Prior to performing as a duo, were you performing as solo artist? Nick, were you doing your own thing before?
Kind of yes and no. I grew up with not grew up, but when I was in high school, my mom wrote a grant. She's an art teacher. It's kind of a weird long story, but my mom wrote a grant to build an addition, a studio for herself, in addition to our house, to I think the Lilly Foundation, which is like an Indiana grant foundation, and she won the grant, and it was a $10,000 grant, and so we spent one summer building a sort of studio on the back of our house in South Bend, and the vast majority of it was an art studio for my mom, but a tiny little sort of back room was sectioned off for a music studio for me and my brothers. And so I had a studio in high school, and that was really where my writing and my playing sort of came into its own. And that was actually kind of one of the reasons that Brian and I came together in the first place. Brian was also writing in high school, had written a couple of songs, and found out about my studio through a mutual friend. And so when we first connected, it was to record some of Brian's music. And from there, it kind of just sort of morphed into this thing where we would book, a 15-minute slot at the local open mic in South Bend, and Brian would book one 15-minute slot, and I would book the 15-minute slot right after, and we would just play on each other's songs for 30 minutes, and that was kind of how the band, in a way, kind of got started. But it was like so it was a very like natural growth from playing separate to just sort of fusing together.
Nice.
Yeah. But we didn't officially come up with the band name, and really when you get a website, I feel like it's when you're officially a band.
Yeah.
I think the domain name was purchased in fall of 2011. So that
You're right.
But there was a few years there where we were both Brian Powers and Nick Gunty, and but playing together, So, but yeah, Francis Luke Court established fall 2011. Pretty sure.
There you go. Brian, when did music become the focal point of your life? What age were you?
I became super interested in it towards the end of high school and early college, and then I kind of feel like when you meet somebody who is also like as into this niche thing, like songwriting is a little bit of a niche
Sure.
interest, right? Especially folk-based songwriting, and so when you found having met Nick, at the very end of high school and then becoming really good friends early on in college, it was kind of just this like. When you both are bringing this energy to something, you inevitably kind of like build off of each other, in a way. So, so I, definitely credit Nick with also like, pushing me more into it, but yeah.
Which is funny because
19.
it's funny because I definitely credit Brian with pulling me into the live. See, I did not really do those open mics until Brian sort of like yanked me out of my studio. It was like, let's do this together.
Yeah. When Nick was saying that he would book a 15-minute slot, I would book a 15-minute slot. It was really like me booking both of our slots and being like, hey, dude, we're playing on Wednesday night.
I need you.
And you know
This
what?
is the time I booked you for.
And you know what? That paradigm continues to this day.
Yeah, I still book our shows to this day.
Nick, you're saying without Brian, there is no duo, because you would have just continued to be a hermit in your studio.
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like your family is musical, though, Nick. Is that true? They had other musicians in your family?
Yeah, my whole family are very creative in all different ways. My brother is a musician and a poet. My sister is a fiction writer. I have another brother who is also a poet and a writer, and my mother is an artist, a painter. So A lot of creativity.
It sounds like you guys had similar like household backgrounds, just as far as what might be being heard in the background.
Yeah.
Almost like you grew up in the same house, because you have nearly that family harmony kind of thing I hear when I see brothers perform together.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that, because there's a funny kind of family intertwined story here, actually. So both of our moms are from California, the San Jose area specifically, and both of our dads are from the Midwest. But back in our parents' 20s, Nick's dad was actually dating my mom's sister, my aunt, right before. That was the relationship prior to Mr. Gunty meeting Mrs. Gunty. And, you know.
You could have been family anyway.
Yeah, so we'd like to joke that we're almost cousins, but it's better that we're not.
Yeah.
We found that out one day after a show when our parents went to one of our shows together and sat together and
Over a bottle of wine.
drank a little bit together. And
And Nick's mom loves this story.
tells it all the time.
Hi, Mrs. Gunty. She's probably watching. You never know. So how did the harmony develop? I mean, like I said, it sounds natural family harmony. Like this is not normal for two people who didn't grow up together to sound this good together.
That took a lot of practice.
Okay.
Well, we moved in together, as Brian alluded to earlier. We moved to Chicago together and lived in an apartment together for 2.5 years. And I think, and that was really when we were playing, as much as possible, just constantly trying to establish the band. And it's probably the only time in our life where we practiced that much. But yeah, it took a lot of practice and it took a lot of iterations.
It works.
And our voices have definitely, as we listen back to old recordings, we can definitely tell that our voices are way more similar now. Just over the years of like listening to the other person, you kind of, I don't know, you pick up their tendencies,
Do you remember early conversations when you were first becoming friends? What kind of music you bonded over? What were you talking about as far as that was concerned?
Paul Simon is always a sort of a touchstone. That was definitely a musician we both listened to growing up. A handful of other things, like what would you say, Cat Stevens?
Yeah, we kind of go through phases, based on your interests at a certain age. We were both super into local natives,
right,
like in our early 20s, and you just, Iron and Wine has always been another one that we come back to a lot. But Paul Simon probably is the number one.
Is there much of a music scene in South Bend? Because the only thing I can think of is Straight No Chaser, right? They were from that area.
Is that right?
Are they from that area?
I think so. I think they met at Indiana College, which is that near South Bend?
Indiana University is in Bloomington,
Okay.
so about 4 hours south.
Well,
of
then
South
I'm
Bend.
wrong.
But there is an Indiana University South Bend, so if they were from that branch, maybe. But there's not the South Bend music scene really started to blossom actually when we were coming out of college. And it's continued to this day. There are a handful of individuals who really if they were to get hit by a bus tomorrow, the scene would have a tough time, and we're super grateful for those individuals. Yeah. One of whom, Jim Ward's hosting us on Friday night in South Bend. But yeah, it doesn't quite have the Ann Arbor scene. You guys are spoiled as hell out here, so enjoy it. But yeah, hopefully one day South Bend will be of the Ann Arbor kiln.
I got to build this yet, but while I was watching the show at the Arc last night, obviously these are pre-recorded, so the last night thing is only relevant to right now. But with your friend Chris DuPont, who's in the room, my friend as well, helping us engineer the session, and just watching he and Kylie and Brad play together, I came up with the idea for a name of a playlist that I need to put together. My State is Better Than Your State is the name of that playlist, and I'm going to build it, and he's going to be in it, and so are several other people. No offense to Indiana or where you guys are living now, but that's my idea. We're going to run with that. Back to you. Okay, anyway. So let's look at the chronology. You put out a debut EP. We talked briefly about that, the one in 2012, all about making a difference to people in far-off lands. Who presented that idea to you? Did you guys were you doing research? Like, who can we help? I mean, where did that come from?
Yeah, it definitely didn't start from who can we help? There was a gentleman at the University of Notre Dame where we attended college who had a nonprofit over in in rural Uganda, in Kindu specifically, and he had been a fan of both of ours for a year or two and said, hey, I have this choir that I've met out in Kindu, Uganda, and if you guys, I don't know what you would do with them, if you want to come up with a project, whatever, I'd be really happy to connect you, with the choir leaders over there. You guys would have to figure out funding and all that, but I would happy to make that connection. I think it'd be really fun. And so we're like, hell yeah, let's do that. Okay, where can we find some money? And, luckily we were in college, could get a grant, and kind of just, winged it.
It's a pretty cool start to a music recording career. Not a lot of people do anything near that, even in their careers, ever.
Absolutely. And, that record would not have turned out the way it did had, Mrs. Gunty not gotten that initial grant for the Gunty studio, because Nick is the producer in the band, and I'm no audio engineer. I'm like you, which is why we need Chris DuPont in the room here.
I can fake my way through it, but these two were better. So, I'm glad to have both of them in the room.
But, so Nick, we really just had a little suitcase of
just
recording gear.
Cable salad and a handful of microphones and an interface I ganked from a friend of mine and just recorded on a laptop in their schoolhouse.
Well, it did well enough to let you continue to do this. I mean, starting points sometimes lead to, well, that didn't work. Let's go back to our day jobs. But 2014, Queen for Me EP came out. Fluke probably is that really kind of where we got a little bit more attention nationally?
Yeah.
So I feel that's where my discovery was right around that time.
Yeah, no, definitely. That was definitely we were really lucky to get to a big opening tour with Darlingside with the release of Fluke, our debut LP, and that definitely pushed us, a good bit. But we also must credit this man, Chris DuPont, in getting us out of our, so think back to our initial tours, they were really all with Chris.
In fact, that Queen for Me release show was where we met Chris. Oh. And I remember that was a short weekend of shows. I believe it was 3 shows, one in Chicago for our EP release, one in Flint, Michigan, and I believe one in Ann Arbor Live. And I remember with every successive show we played with Chris, I remember just being like more and more and more floored. And
how does he play like that?
And then we from there spent a number of weekends throughout that following year together, touring Midwestern cities, and that was definitely what pulled us out of Chicago to begin with.
Awesome. Well, after Fluke came Silver and Gold, another EP. Sunnyside, which is about where I saw you last. You performed in the studio. I know you did Maria, which at that time had not been released. It was a new song that I had not heard. And Where Do You Run From? Is that the name of the song? From Fluke? Was my favorite song at the time. And then you did Maria in front of me. Like, wait, I have a new favorite song. And Maria ends up on the new album too. And we're going to hear another song. I don't know what, not that one probably, but Safe and Sound is the name of the new record. And it shows up on there too. So perfect lead into another song. You also happen to mention Darlingside. So maybe the order of operations. I don't remember what order you said you were doing songs in.
Should we do you want to do In My Life?
You don't have to, just because we led there. Do what you were going to do.
Let's come back to that one. Yeah. We'll do another couple of tunes. We're gonna play a couple of tunes right now. We're gonna do one little a cappella tune called This Morning, and then we're gonna go into a tune called All the Things, both of which are on Safe and Sound. This morning I dreamt, forgetting your name, while that of your child and husband came. I bent close to face, you whispered in song, we barely embraced, and then you were gone. The distance in space, all moving along, our time and our place, all vanish at dawn. This morning I dreamt, a memory came, the memory went,
it started to rain. Sing me out if I'm lonely, breathe me in if I'm blue, fill me up if I'm hollow, break me down if I'm through. And if I'm asleep, oh, could you wake me too? Oh, sing me out if I'm lonely, breathe me in if I'm blue. When those rain clouds are rumbling down, feel your rooms all flooded in doubt. If it thunders a bit too loud, I'll sing for you, my songbird, finding some solid ground. Oh, if it's cold and when we're gray, alive as stones, stuck in some shade, with all our dust on, deep in our shade, I'll sing for you, my songbird, sing beyond our days.
Does anybody know how hard a whistle solo is?
It's like a friggin' chickadee.
That's awesome. Brian Powers and Nicholas Gunty are Francis Luca Chord, and that's a couple of songs from their new album, which I highly recommend, Safe in Sound. And we're at Grove Studios in Ypsilanti. I have to give a shout out to them and thank them for, what they do to make sure that I have a place to do this. It was a few years ago when I didn't have a radio home anymore, and they wanted me to do a podcast here to kind of get me back doing what I love doing. And I really want to thank them. So if you're a musician in the Detroit or Ann Arbor area looking for a place to practice before your show, we're standing in the biggest room. We're standing in the deluxe room. There's a smaller room that's about half the size right across from us. There's a podcast studio, a DJ studio, and a mixing studio as well. Chris DuPont was with me a second ago looking at that other. I got to come back here and do some mixing. There's some great speakers here. So lots of multi-purpose reasons to pop over here if you're a musician in the area. Check it out. Look for Grove Studios in Ypsilanti. And again, thanks to them for making this home possible for me so that I can continue doing the thing that I love, which is highlighting musicians I feel who need a little bit more attention.
Thank you. Well, we really appreciate it.
We all have some sort of purpose in life. I think that's mine. I think that I'm here to sing the praises of other people and make it be heard. So if I didn't have people to work with, it would be hard to do. So anyway.
You're a beautiful man, John.
Yeah,
Gracias.
truly.
So, Nick, we talked a bit about the production that you like to do. What are you working on currently? I think you're working on a Darling Side record. Is that correct?
I'm not working on that would be a dream.
Okay. Somehow I thought you were.
The production work I've done for Darling Side is live, front of house.
Okay.
I am working on a handful of other projects. This is one of the things that I have done to stay busy during, just not just through COVID, but through this small business experience of being a band, is producing other bands, and so there's a handful of other artists I work with. Chris is one of them. We share a lot of music and a lot of production projects together. There's another artist out in Philly named Maggie Pope, who has been putting out some music lately. She put out a couple of singles in the last couple of months. There's another artist, Henry Mills.
Do you have a train song?
I
Sorry. I'm not sure if that shows up on the microphones or not, but there's a train going by.
It's a beautiful train. I feel like it's a very musical part of the show.
And this is how Nick's brain works. That train horn. Oh yeah, that's gonna go on a record.
Yeah, can we sample that? So yeah, there's a handful of other artists that I work with A lot of them are folk bands. Not all of them, but a lot of them, yeah.
And Brian, I feel like since I last saw you, you might have gotten married since then.
I
since
did.
2021.
I did.
Congratulations
Yeah,
on that.
Thank you very much. Got in before COVID, luckily.
Nice. What has been keeping you busy in the years off when you guys were not really able to perform together?
Yeah, so I do nonprofit work as well. So I work for an organization actually out in Silicon Valley that hires people experiencing homelessness to clean city parks. Organization called Neighborhood Hands. So that is taken a lot of my time in the last several years. It's something I'm super passionate about. So, yeah, I'm lucky to have two different sets of work that I really, really love.
That's great.
Really love doing. So.
Well, we mentioned the start of the band was South Bend, and you also mentioned you're a distance band, which means you don't live in the same city anymore.
That's right, and haven't for a while. Not since 2016.
Wow.
Yeah, really. Not since right before Fluke came out was the move out date, and a hell of a move out date. We
were up against the deadline for the record and the deadline for our housing. So
my goodness.
at the same time. So
that's not too much pressure. Did the pandemic distance make being a duo harder for you? Because you were already a distance band. Now you're a pandemic distance.
Yeah.
I mean,
the pandemic made things harder, obviously financially, because our tour income completely dried up, and so that's when we actually played our first shows post-COVID just back in September. So we did take a while to come back into it, out of necessity, really. But yeah, but in a way we have definitely had a leg up on a number of other, distance bands, in that we have had our own separate recording rigs for a while, and pretty familiar with the remote process.
Yeah, although one thing that I did notice that a lot of bands were able to do, Darlene's Night is one of them, was every once in a while get together, do a little impromptu, sort of like stream show, and there's just no way to stream over the 600 miles of distance. So there's so that was difficult, figuring out a way to continue to stay in people's minds and ears was tough, because there was no way to ride that particular wave, I think. But
how can you work on harmonies if you're not in the same room together? That seems really hard. Headphones and Zoom? What's the magic?
Yeah, well, a lot of it, so our remote process was really just record something, send it to the other person in an email, and they listen to it. They record something on top, send it back. It's kind of a
lot of layering, a lot of pancaking.
But at the end, at the same time, one of the beauties of modern technology is that that's really easy to do now, and very effective. And yeah, so that was a big part of it. Was like Brian said, having our own recording rigs and being able to share, just over the internet.
Well, the pandemic broke a lot of us in different ways, but it didn't break the band, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Which could have been different. We know a lot of bands who are no longer bands.
Yeah. Pretty much every band, it seems like there was at least some member in the band that was just like, okay, this, being forced to be at home and off the road is like, wow, this actually, like, I notice a big difference in my health, because traveling is hard, it really, really takes a toll physically, mentally on you. And
finding good food to eat.
Yeah, totally. No, absolutely. It's really hard to have good habits when you're on the road. You don't have control of your schedule. Mm-hmm. So anyways, we're, yes, definitely did not break the band. We feel like we're doing it in a healthier way, even though it's, we're playing significantly fewer shows. It's, we feel like every show now is like we have so much more energy for, because we're not exhausted, and it's all new and fresh and exciting. And, we've really enjoyed, getting back into it in this way.
And the style of live that you do around this microphone is a bit of a dance to watch, really, to not hit each other with the guitars. And you had Katie Van Dusen in there trying to get in there and sing. And it's like, how do you practice that, really? I mean,
you can't. That's something you can't fake your way through. You're just going to get hit in the face if you don't do it right. So, yeah. But that's also something that we've been doing for a good long time, and we obviously could improve our technique a bit, but was something that we were doing long enough before the pandemic that coming back to it felt pretty natural afterwards.
Sounded great. The new album is Safe and Sound. I noticed that Windows is it's a 3-minute song with 6 lines?
Yeah.
It's not a lot of lyrics, but it works
not a lot of
really,
lyrics.
It works really nicely to start off the record.
Thank you.
We've already heard Thank You, Derrick Watson. We've heard a couple others from this record. I noticed that both Sunnyside and Maria have the words "take me" in them, both of them. Like, what is going on here? Is there something going on with the take me? I don't know really what that, just something I noticed. Also noticed, I think you guys have played since I last saw you Mountain Stage.
Yeah.
I don't remember when that happened, but I
Back
feel like
in September, yeah.
that's a cool thing. I mean, that
Love Mountain Stage.
to get the national attention, which is probably the hardest thing for, like, name a millionaire folk singer. Good luck.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or even a folk singer who's making a really good living. It's just not.
Yeah. It's,
So
yes.
shows like Mountain Stage and E-Town that are on nationally syndicated radio stations across the country, it's really the best spot for you guys to get exposure. I hope that this helps too, but it's not as significant as something like that. How did that come about?
We played Mountain Stage back in 2016 on the Fluke tour.
Oh, okay.
So kind of got in with those folks at that time. And actually, we played a remote Mountain Stage
that was
concert in like June of 2020,
Oh,
like
right.
early on in the pandemic. That was our one attempt to do like a live thing, and it was tough. But
and that was partly because one of the first shows that to get canceled for pandemic was a Mountain Stage show.
Oh, okay.
of
So
ours.
they're letting you do a makeup, essentially.
So they did. Yeah, exactly.
But we can't speak highly enough of those folks who are enjoying their 40th season as of about a month ago. So it's just an amazing thing that they've got going down there in Charleston, West Virginia. Highly recommend any big music fans in the Midwest to go travel to see that show. It's really, really something.
Yeah.
So.
Well, as I mentioned, making folk music isn't a great way to make a living. Do you have we want to be as big as goal, or we'd like to get to this level? We're playing this kind of rooms. We're opening for these kind of, do you guys talk about that stuff, or you just let things happen?
That's a very interesting question.
Because you just have this discussion yesterday.
In our 20s, we were definitely, like, after Fluke, after getting some national attention with the Darling Side tour and doing Mountain Stage and stuff, we were definitely pushing hard, and trying to get to that point where we had a full team around us, an agent, a label, et cetera. And we actually finally landed an agent in December of 2019, promptly lost them in April 2020 when COVID hit.
No money for them.
So the band had to, we definitely had to have this reckoning of that we are approaching the band differently post-COVID, but by necessity, financially.
Sure.
And I think we think it's really important to be transparent with listeners about the reality of being, as you've mentioned, a folk musician these days. Like, for example, just to get practically into the numbers, so we have roughly 200,000 monthly listeners across streaming platforms, but that comes out to roughly $500 a month. And obviously we have costs, fixed costs like any small business, and there are two of us. And so you can do the math on how that shakes out financially. And so it's like,
great.
So you have to be realistic about, just the trade-offs of what it would take to be on the road as much as it would, to be able to do it full time. But also we are not at the stage in our band where we, could do that. So it's, so we in this stage are just grateful to still be doing it. And, the goal is to just keep doing it as long as we can, in a way that's, that works for our families and our, us as individuals and all that. So.
And to your point, John, about, there are no millionaire folk singers. I think we kind of also knew that going in, and it's one of those things that, like, I guess we think about it a lot. We think about the fact that, like, there's just not as high as the ceiling ever may be. It's never going to be, Taylor Swift high or Rihanna high.
Brandi Carlile. She's within the realm, right?
That's true.
That's true.
I guess it's it's like the music that we play. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of like when you frame it in terms of how big do we want this project to be, I feel like that's kind of where you start to orient your creative and aesthetic taste towards what's popular. And that's something that we've always tried to avoid, actually, because to us, I think the creative integrity of what we do is the most important. Not to say that Brandy Carlisle isn't creative, or Taylor Swift or Rihanna, but just in the genre that we play, the type of music that we're interested in playing. I don't know that it's ever going to have I don't think we're ever going to sell at a stadium. I'll put it that way. But that's okay, because I think the more important thing for us is to build relationships with the people who do appreciate what we do. Yeah. And you're one of them. And we saw a lot of those people at the Arc last night. And so that is, I guess that's a roundabout way of getting to the point that we, I think, are more focused on cultivating the relationships with the intimate super fans than we are with reaching masses of people.
Yeah, they'll stay with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the not opposite side, just a tangential part of that coin would be like a Bon Iver is a household name, though doesn't really play pop music. So that could be a goal, like to be mentioned in the same reviews in Paste magazine as that kind of person.
And every once in a while that happens to an indie artist, and
they just get elevated.
They just get elevated somehow. And that's also a game that we know that we can't rely on.
You can't force it either.
You can't force it. You
has
can't
to happen.
Control that. That's something that is kind of decided around you by other people in power. And so we try not to get too hung up on it.
Lyrically, where are you inspired? Are you like stories that happen in the news? I saw a funny Facebook post the other day that inspired me to. Sometimes I like write down fake band names, and I thought this might even make an interesting.
Do you want to come up with one for us?
Aggressive goose on the roof was something that somebody posted a sign that a building was telling them, "Don't use this entrance. There's an aggressive goose on the roof." I'm like, that would be kind of a funny band name or even a song title.
Yeah, totally. It's like a very musical line. Actually.
Yes, it was, and I thought, well, I wonder where you guys get your inspiration for. I mean, obviously the story that went along with the first song you played was a political thing that was going on.
Right. Although that song is mostly not about politics. It's mostly about it's kind of like I would say using a political figure, a political touchstone to reflect on yourself.
Fair enough.
I think a lot of the music is sort of inspired by the external world, but internally focused. Yeah,
you can only kind of write towards what you know, and so, like going back to Safe and Sound, this new record, like definitely a lot of that music, is definitely coming from a place of like heaviness, and isolation, and thinking about at least a couple of my tunes, Sunny Side, In My Life, but definitely some of your songs as well. Mm-hmm. It's I don't know, it's hard to answer that question, but
I think maybe one concrete way to answer this question is that there are a couple of things that we find ourselves coming back to, a couple of themes that we find ourselves coming back to. One that I think we kind of alluded to a second ago is like personal growth, and that's kind of always a part of our framing of our music. The other is, or another is climate change. It's something that we think about all the time and think is a really important issue to be talking about and to be working on. There are, I'm trying to think of some of the other, I can't even think of our own lyrics at this point, but
you're going to have to in a minute because we're going to go to the song.
Well, Window is like right up the climate change alley.
Yeah. Social justice of all, in all flavors. And, Yeah.
Well, there you go. Safe in Sound, the new record from Francis Luca Cord, available now. You can physically get it. I can't remember, was there vinyl yesterday on that one? There was vinyl, so I thought. So that's available. Website address is francislucacord.com. Did you lock it in? Okay, cool.
We locked it in. Francis with an E.
Yes. Oh, yes. We should be more specific. Introduce this next song.
So this next song is called "In My Life." It's the last track on Safe and Sound, and we were lucky enough to get our pals in Darlingside to sing on it. So hope you like it.
6 beautiful voices all at once.
Yes. Sorry, you're just getting 2 of them today.
In my life I've grown upside down, caught my string on the ground where the river won't run, where the sparrow won't die, where the spirit can't sing and the arrow won't cry. Oh, I've seen the sun go down and the moon on the rise. I saw it all once. In my age I faced a dream gone gray, shaking down in the shade of a hollow oak tree, over honey so sweet. I fought a killer queen bee, brought me to my knees. Oh, I've seen a cloud rain down in the flash of a light. I saw it all once. Oh, I've been running wild, been a fool reconciled. When I die, take me the long way home. Lay me down in the snow, where the sparrow might go, where the hollow oaks fold into a cradle in time to make a nest from the bone. Oh, I saw but I went blind. Now we know what we know. We'll see it all.
This could have just been 1967 as far as I'm concerned. That could have been on a Simon and Garfunkel record so comfortably. What a beautiful song.
Thank you, John.
In My Life finishes up the new album from Francis Record, and I believe our musical portion of the interview today. I know that something unusual happened to you guys, and it's a pretty cool thing. You got a handwritten letter from a student, and it's your next thing that you're doing. Tell me about that. And it's going to be over by the time people hear this, but it's still pretty like, what? Really?
Yeah, really. So last night at the Arc was really our warm-up show for, the biggest concert of the tour, which is in 30 minutes at Bishop Elementary for the 4th and 5th grade Spanish immersion class, La Super Clase.
How did that happen?
One of the teacher of this class, Christina Harita, has been a longtime fan of both us and Chris DuPont. And Chris introduced us to her, probably 5 or 6 years ago. And we've actually played, this is our return trip to Bishop Elementary. We played her classroom back in pre-COVID days. So we are stoked to get back there and hang with those kids.
Have you heard anything from your previous visit where you inspired anybody to become a musician? Because isn't that kind of what it's all about at this point?
I don't know. I think they inspired us to stick with it.
And also inform us of what's happening in pop music these days. We learned about Lil Nas X last time we were there.
It's Lil Nas X, I believe is the...
Excuse me.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Old Town Road had just come out.
Yeah. They are very inspiring to be around. I would say the inspiration is mostly one way, and it's toward us.
Nice. The new album is Safe and Sound. Hopefully that's getting on the camera because I have no idea. There's nobody behind the camera. Brian Bowers, Nicholas Gunty, Francis Zuckercord, big hug. Thank you so much for doing this for me.
Super wonderful to be here, John. This place is amazing, and we're really grateful to be here.
Yeah.
Big thanks again to Grove Studios for providing a home for me to do the podcast and not minding that I did it in the non-podcast studio. So if you've been looking for a place to get out of the garage and get into the studio, that's their motto. That's what they want you to do here. Look them up online and look up Francis Zuckercord. Find out about all these records that are available, this catalog of music that continues to grow. I hope there's more coming.
Sure is.
There'll be more.
There's more podcasts coming too. I've got a bunch more to record. This is the 50-something podcast. If you're new to the podcast, check out previous sessions with Glenn Phillips and Willie Porter and all these other great people who have stopped by and visited me. Thanks for listening.